I am just an ordinary mother. A woman you might pass on the street, nothing special. All my life, every chapter, every sacrifice has been devoted to my son. Every breath, every day, it's all been with Michael in mind. And yet, one morning in May, my story took a turn. That day, I traveled more than 4 hours by bus from my small coastal town in upstate New York down into the heart of New York City. Just to see my son. The only child I ever raised, the boy whose first steps I cheered, whose first heartbreak I quietly wept for, whose victories I celebrated with a fervor only a mother can know. But what met me in the city was not a joyful reunion. Instead, I found myself in a run-down backyard shed, stripped of lights and running water, a place so old and neglected it seemed, hardly fit for storage, let alone people, not a word of welcome from anyone in my son's family. Instead, they locked me in, alone. This probably sounds to you like something out of a suspense movie or a TV crime show. It would to me, too, if I hadn't lived it. But this is reality. My reality. This is my story as it truly happened. Afterward, the single choice I made, one tiny action, sent a chill through my entire family. They were not afraid of what they had done to me, but terrified that I had decided to speak out, afraid that I found my voice at last. If you have ever been a mother, or if you've ever felt wounded by someone you loved more than anyone else in this world, then please, I beg you, listen to my story. It might turn out to be a story you recognize as your own. Hello, my name is Margaret Thomas. I turned 72 this year. People often say that old age is the autumn of your life, mellow, quiet, lit with a certain bittersweet light. But to me, it feels more like winter, long, cold, a time when even the bright, happy memories get buried under an endless, silent snow. I was born and raised in a little oceanside town in upstate New York. In the winter, the world sparkled white with snow as far as the eye could see. In summer, sunlight glimmered on miles of green fields, and the steady rhythm of the waves was ever present. As a child, I grew up surrounded by the sounds of life, my mother's sewing machine thumping away, my father hammering boards together for his small boat projects, the wind sweeping in off the shore. We were poor, so poor that sometimes dinner was a single bowl of stew, but there was laughter in our little house, and I was happy. Never did I imagine I would ever be swallowed whole by loneliness. When I was 22, I met my husband, John Thomas. He was a railroad engineer, a steady man with kind eyes who always took time to listen. He wasn't flashy, not a catch in the eyes of most, but his calm, patient voice and steady, gentle company won me over. We were married just 3 months after we met. Our marriage was never glamorous, yet every day together felt purposeful and precious. The kind of marriage that roots you. When our son was born, all the love I had was poured into him. We named him Michael. I prayed that he would grow up strong, resilient, and good. To any outsider, we seemed to be doing just fine. But when I was 40, tragedy struck out of the blue. My husband died in a train accident, gone in an instant. I became a widow overnight. Michael was only 13. I didn't even have time to mourn. There was no choice. I had to keep moving. I took in laundry, worked the farmer's market, stitched hems for neighbors late into the night. Anything to pay for Michael's school supplies, to keep him in shoes, to keep a roof over our heads. There were nights I worked until 2 or 3 in the morning, my hands numb with fatigue, and we barely scraped by. I couldn't buy him a new pair of sneakers, not even once that whole winter. I never complained. All I wanted was for Michael to get an education and a better life than I could ever give him. The years tumbled past. Michael went off to college in the city. I was so proud it hurt sometimes. I dreamed that he'd become a successful engineer, settle down with a kind woman, and perhaps, one day, let me cradle a grandchild on my lap. He did marry, in the city, a bright, fashionable, ambitious woman named Emily, a modern girl through and through, smart, driven, beautiful. But from the day they married, a distance began to grow between us. Little, seemingly harmless things at first, fewer calls, less time at the holidays. If I visited during New Year's, Emily would always have a reason to be out too busy with work, she'd say. One afternoon, I called Michael just to check in. He answered with an agitated whisper, "Mom, I'm in a meeting right now. I'll call you back later, okay?" But that, later, never came. I never blamed Michael. I always told myself, young people are busy. I'm old now. I shouldn't get in the way. So, I stayed in the old family house by myself, holding fast to the slow comfort of routine. Every morning, I made a pot of oatmeal, brewed my tea, and sat by the window with an old photograph of us, just me, John, and little Michael smiling fit to burst in some long ago summer. In the photograph, nothing ever changed. We grinned together, the way families are meant to. But 3 months ago, returning from a grocery run, I slipped on a curb and fell hard enough to break my leg. I was taken to our small town hospital and spent 3 weeks in a cast. Those long, lonely days in a hospital bed felt endless. I waited, day after day, for some word from Michael, a call, a text, anything. For 14 days my phone was silent. No one came. Not a single message, not a knock at the door. It was the first time in decades I truly felt invisible. Like I didn't even exist. When my cast finally came off, there was no one to take me home. I rode the bus, limped my way to the kitchen, made myself porridge, changed my own bandages, and heated water to soak my aching foot. No one knew my pain or my solitude. I cried alone every night. Being forgotten. No one ever tells you how much that can hurt. It was during those lonely weeks that I began to wonder, had I made a mistake? Devoting my entire life to Michael? Did I leave myself behind? Still, on a bright morning in May, with the sky clear and the birds singing, I made a decision. I would go to the city. I would see Michael. Not just through a screen, or in a rushed phone call, but truly see him. Look into my son's eyes, feel the warmth of his hug, remind him that I was still here. This was about more than a simple visit. I wanted, fiercely, with every tired cell left in my body, to be seen by my son as his mother. Once, just one more time. I packed a small bag, some homemade oatmeal cookies from the Methodist Church Bazaar, a canister of green tea, and the monogrammed handkerchief I embroidered for Michael when he got into college. Then, on the earliest bus, I set out for New York City. I had no idea what would happen. I only knew that I wished so deeply for Michael to call me Mom again, just one more time. It was early on May 12th, not quite dawn. The air was crisp, with the city's towers starting to glow gold with morning. Sun seeping through their crannies and cracks. When I arrived at Penn Station, the place buzzed like an angry hive. Crowds hustled past, never slowing, barely glancing at a gray-haired woman with an old suitcase. Still, my heart danced. I was finally going to see my son. I walked, slowly, feeling the ache in my still-healing knee out to a leafy neighborhood in the Brooklyn suburbs, neat rows of modern homes with driveways, yards, and children's toys sprinkling the grass. At the steps of Michael and Emily's beautiful 3-story brick house, I paused. It was worlds away from my battered clapboard home upstate. I straightened my scarf, took a deep breath, and rang the bell. After a moment, the door swung open, and there stood Emily, my daughter-in-law. She wore what looked like a brand-name sweater, her dark hair pinned into an elegant knot. When she saw me, her eyes widened, startled. No, more than that, actually. There was something like dread in her face. "Mrs. Thomas? Why are you here? How come you didn't call first?" I tried to answer gently. I smiled and let my voice be as soft as possible. "I'm sorry for dropping by. I just wanted to see Michael. I started out from home early this morning. I won't stay long, I promise. I don't want to be a bother." Emily was silent for a beat, lips pressed tight. Then, wordless, she turned and walked back inside. I gathered my suitcase and quietly followed her in. The inside of their home was immaculate. Everything in its place. Floors so polished, the rich grain of the wood shone underfoot. Somewhere, maybe from a reed diffuser or those sachets sold at the fancy boutique shops in Manhattan, a gentle lavender scent floated through the rooms. I stepped out of my shoes, paused just inside the entrance, suddenly overwhelmed. Emotions began to bubble up, thick and hot, threatening to spill over. I bit down hard, summoning willpower I'd learned in all my 7 decades, and reminded myself to keep my composure. Just then, I heard footsteps overhead on the second floor. A moment later, Michael came down the stairs. My son, tall, well-built, a grown man in crisp slacks and a freshly ironed white shirt, the kind he used to wear for job interviews or big presentations. Time had made him look both mature and almost unfamiliar, but still, I could see the boy I'd bandaged and comforted after scraped knees and broken hearts. He looked at me, but in his eyes, there was no recognition, no rush of joy, no warmth. Instead, I saw a weary hesitation, a man thrown off balance by my presence in his carefully ordered world. "Mom, why didn't you call first?" The sound of his voice pained me. There was no happiness in it, just confusion, maybe a trace of annoyance. My son, my flesh and blood, a little lost for words. I answered simply, because it was all I could do. "I just wanted to see you, Michael. I wanted to be here." In that instant, as the words left my lips, I wondered if this home, this spotless, lavender-scented house was a place where words like that belonged any longer. Michael guided me into the living room. I found myself seated on a spotless sofa that looked barely used. The room was filled with tasteful modern touches, expensive art on the walls, shining glass vases, nothing out of place. I spoke for a few moments, telling them about my hospital stay, the tumble I took outside the grocery store, the months with my leg in a cast, how the mechanical beep-beep of the blood pressure monitor had sometimes felt like my only conversation partner through the nights. But as I talked, I felt certain no one was really listening. Michael's wife, Emily, busied herself in the kitchen but didn't pour me any tea, though a mug sat in front of me. Michael, for his part, sat close enough that I could see the messages popping up on his phone, which he checked over and over as if waiting for a more important invitation to arrive. Silence filled up the room, an unnatural, heavy hush that made me feel smaller with every passing second. Lunchtime crept closer. I cleared my throat and spoke quietly. "My leg, it still aches sometimes. I was wondering, if it's not too much, could I maybe lie down for a bit? Just somewhere to stretch out for a little while. I promise I won't stay long." Emily shot a quick glance at Michael. He looked back at her and said nothing. A moment, heavy and tense, passed. Then Emily said curtly, "The upstairs is under construction right now, so it's off limits. But there's a back room used to be storage. It's got a window and a cot. You can rest there." I nodded, grateful for anything. I would never have dared to complain. A place to stretch out. Right then, that was more kindness than I'd expected. Emily led me down a narrow hallway, past the kitchen, and opened a creaky wooden door toward the back of the house. Inside, cardboard boxes were stacked against the wall. A floor fan with a tangled cord sat unused, and atop the thin mattress on the floor, a faded blanket was lightly dusted. It smelled faintly of mothballs, the scent of things forgotten. With a polite, cool voice, Emily told me, "You can rest here. Sorry, we're just a bit busy right now. I'll bring you some lunch later, okay?" I managed. "Thank you," as softly as a sigh. I stepped into the little room and turned to pull the door shut behind me. The latch clicked quietly. Click. A small noise but clear. Sound of a lock. My heart caught. I didn't want to believe it. My hand trembled on the doorknob. I tried to turn it. Locked. I rapped gently. "Michael? Emily? The door. Is it locked?" Silence. 1 minute ticked by, then another, then 5. The minutes lengthened. No footsteps, no voices. Just the unyielding silence of the house. I sank down to the floor, my back pressed to the wall, my heart thudding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Outside, the day was bright and clear, but in that small room, the air seemed to darken as the sun climbed higher, The only light came from a small window near the ceiling, too high to reach, too small to open. I couldn't see out. The world outside might as well have been 1,000 miles away. This couldn't be happening. I tried to rationalize, to make sense of it. Maybe there'd been some misunderstanding. Maybe they were afraid I'd fall, that this was their way to keep me safe. Maybe there was a child in the house and they just didn't want me wandering in. Case I tripped. It would pass soon, surely. But I'd heard no giggles, no footsteps, no little voices. There were no toys, no picture books, none of the signs of family life I'd so dearly hoped to glimpse. Uncertainty crept from my stomach to my chest. A new, deeper fear bloomed in me. Was I really locked in? Was I being kept apart deliberately by my own flesh and blood? I reached into my pocket, fumbled for my cell phone. No bars. No service. A dead zone. So I sat, quietly, as old memories rushed over me. A tidal wave impossible to hold back. I remembered Michael shivering against my back on blizzard nights, so small, so trusting. Sewing his jacket until dawn before school picture day, because he'd torn the sleeve and begged me not to be mad. Now I was alone, trapped in the back room of a fancy Brooklyn house, forgotten by the people I'd built my entire life around. How had it come to this? I stared at my hands, old, veined, chapped from years of work. Why? Why would the one I'd sacrificed everything for, the boy I nearly died, raising, choose to lock his own mother away in a storage room? I had no answer. Not yet. But somewhere deep inside me, something fragile was trembling, beginning to wake. Was this just a terrible misunderstanding? Or was I standing at the threshold of a far scarier truth? A truth I could barely bring myself to name? Sitting there in silence on that hard floor, I didn't know. I didn't know where this would lead. But at that moment, I only knew one thing. I was still here. Still Margaret Thomas. Still a mother, no matter what. And my story was not yet over. The air in the room felt so heavy. It was as if it meant to swallow me whole. A faint shaft of light filtered in from a tiny high window, barely enough to carve out the shadows along the walls. That was all. A sad little glow just deep enough to reveal the hunched outlines of forgotten crates, the rusted frame of an old child's bicycle, the seat torn, one wheel flat. In the thin air, dust drifted, illuminated in that single streak of dull sunlight. And over by the far wall, laid directly on the frigid tiles, was a mattress thin, soiled, coated in dust, with a thin, scratchy blanket that looked almost gray from years of neglect. Moving gingerly, I reached for the wall, using its flatness and the chipped molding to help me grope my way across the gloom. I felt for a light switch, searching in vain for even the smallest sign of relief. A click, a bit of hope, but there was nothing. I found only more of the deep, suffocating dark nothing but silence so profound it made my ears hurt. Like a pressure wave after an explosion. The quiet felt alive, and worse, it felt hungry. I made my way back to the door, old knees protesting every step. My hands closed around the doorknob, a cool, brassy thing that should have been ordinary, and I turned it, harder this time. It didn't budge. Michael? Emily? My voice was small, wavering. I knocked lightly, listening for any sign of footsteps, the familiar shuffle of my son's shoes, even the clatter of a plate in the kitchen. Nothing. Not a word, not a thud from the living room, not a sound of life anywhere in that polished house. I knocked again, harder. The pounding of my own palm echoed bitterly, sharp and hollow. For a moment, the sound was so empty, so stark. It seemed the room itself was swallowing my existence, devouring me, erasing me. And then, with the weight of fear bearing down, I started to pound on the door, my hand stinging with each desperate blow. Michael, it's Mom! Please open the door! I'm tired, my leg is aching. Can you hear me? No reply came. No footsteps, no voices, no clatter of dishes or rustle of paper. Nothing to suggest another living soul was anywhere in the house. It felt as if, from the moment I set foot in this place, I'd become invisible. Like I'd never really been there at all. Like my whole history, my years, my sacrifices had been erased in an instant. The only presence in the room was silence, absolute, unbroken. My strength gave out, and I folded to the floor, my body sagging onto the cold tile. Even through the thick denim of my jeans, the chill bit deep, seeping straight to my bones, and the smell in the air. Mold, dust, metal clawed at my throat. I coughed, unable to stop, and fumbled in my pocket for a handkerchief. Pressed to my nose, it did little good. The smells were everywhere, inside me now. Then, as my shoulders heaved, something new broke loose, a single, hot tear slipped free and fell. But this wasn't pain, not really. Not the ordinary ache of flesh or even loneliness. It was deeper, older. It was the private sting of betrayal, of a quiet, deep wound. I raked my pocket for my old cell phone, its case cracked, its screen spotted with age. I slid my thumb across the screen, and the red battery light blinked weakly. Even the phone was close to dying. No service. The phone told me so in simple, final words. No signal. I tried to call Michael. I tried the neighbors. Tried 911. Each time the call began, the phone vibrated in hope. But the only reply was a sharp beep, beep, followed by the cold hush of total disconnection. My hope died with each sound. My hands grew limp. I settled the useless phone on my lap and went totally still. Outside, the city New York spun on as always, life, laughter, motion. But in here, where sunlight struggled in and silence ruled, I felt like a neglected tool, an old, battered rolling pin, shoved in the back of a cabinet and left to gather dust. Once more, I took in the room, hunting for a gap, a crack, some rescue. But there were no seams, no vents, not so much as a keyhole that would let in air or sound. Only that one little window, perched up almost at the ceiling, so high above I could hardly imagine standing to reach it. And even if I could, my leg, the one I'd broken 3 months earlier, still swollen and stiff, was already aching. A persistent throb that spread up and down with every twitch. I reached inside my overcoat, the same worn wool I'd traveled all the way, downstate in, and pulled forth the notebook I always kept. Inside were my daily reminders, medication, grocery lists, but also my most secret thoughts, those truths no one else had ever seen. When I could barely breathe for dread, I opened to the last blank page. I took a stub of pencil and, though my hand shook, I pressed down, writing with what strength I had left. To whoever finds this notebook, please, please ask, why is it that a mother should ever be locked away by her own son and daughter-in-law? Please ask them why. Even as I set the pencil aside, my hand kept trembling. I'd never, so far as I could remember, written anything so bitter, so final. Never, never once, in 7 decades, did I imagine that at my age, I'd be reduced to scribbling desperate notes like, a missing person, locked in my own child's home and reduced to pleading with the empty air. My old wind-up pocket watch told me the unthinkable, 2000 p.m. It had been close to 5 hours, by then, since someone had closed and locked the door. No water, no food, almost no light at all. Waves of panic washed over me, cold sweat breaking out along my spine. My heart thumped so hard it hurt. I pressed my back to the wall and tried to breathe slow and deep, to force the pulse from my ears and make my panic subside. And there, in the darkness, memory found me. I was 4 years old again, in 1945. It was the war, World War II, far from over. Sirens wailed, roaring up and down the valley, and my mother had grabbed my hand and led me, half running, into the storm shelter dug behind our little house. I remember still, the dirt under my nails, the sharp smell of sweat from the neighbors, and the heavy, deep rumble shaking the ground from distant bombs. I'd screamed for my mother. "Mommy!" Over and over, though she was right there, her arms wrapped tightly around me. Even so, terror overwhelmed, so rooted in being locked in, it nearly pulled me apart. That same terror pressed around me now, tight and suffocating and all-consuming. But this time, there was no mother to shield me. This time, I was the mother. And the one who'd abandoned me this time was my own son. I drew my knees tight against my chest, curling up in the farthest corner where the shadows gathered thickest. There, old memories found me. The box of crayons I'd saved for weeks to buy, giving up my own supper for just one extra color for Michael. The tiny blue dress shirt I'd picked up early and washed late one night so that, when he woke, he'd find it fresh and crisp for picture day. That endless wet night I walked 3 miles through the rain to the all-night pharmacy because his fever spiked and the local store was closed. The jubilant day he'd gotten that college acceptance, his face so alive with hope and pride, the way his eyes used to shine. Now, those eyes, the eyes I'd yearned for, were gone from me. Michael's gaze now? It was cold, not my boys at all, but some strangers. Cold and watchful and sharp, driving me out, wishing me gone from this house, from his life. Part of me tried to believe he simply didn't know that this was all Emily's doing, that a mistake had been made. Surely there must be some reasonable explanation, but in some deep, unyielding place inside my head, a harsher truth whispered, no. He knows. He's aware. He understands everything. Time ground to a halt. The ticking of my pocket watch felt like the chisel, carving away each possible moment I could survive. Back aching, knees throbbing, even the movement of that threadbare mattress beneath me creaking so loudly felt intolerable. I let myself press back against the wall, eyes closed. I pictured, in that moment, the kitchen from my old house, a chipped kettle on the stove, bright morning light beyond the window, a line of sparrows hopping on the garden fence, a fuzzy radio buzzing out a tune. And, in memory, my small Michael ran in at breakfast, calling out in clear, bright tones, "Mom, what's for dinner tonight?" I couldn't answer. If I used my voice, I'd have burst into tears. And still, I didn't want to cry. Not now, not again, not here in this silent, forgotten room where no one would hear, where every sob would just add another mark to my erasure. I sat there, silent, time grinding forward and back, the distant sound of the city, the only marker that life still moved beyond these walls. I lost my sense of hours, whether it was afternoon or rolling toward evening. Light never changed. The room remained still. And all the while thirst grew sharper, digging its claws into me. My lips cracked, my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. Desperate, I peeled my eyes around the floor, praying for a forgotten bottle, a half-filled glass, anything that might stave off this growing ache. But there was nothing. Only litter, broken boxes, dust. Near the wall, I found an old, damp towel tumbled onto a battered folding chair. I took it, held it to my lips. The stench of mildew and old gasoline nearly made me retch, and nausea forced me to turn away. I tried to stand. With every movement, my entire body screamed in protest. The half-healed bone in my leg felt like it might snap again. Still, I braced against the wall and forced myself, crawling nearly to the tiny window at the top of the wall. I needed to see the sky, to remind myself I was still part of the living world. But even tiptoed, arms stretched full, the window was feet above, hopelessly out of reach. Sweat soaked my clothes. My back ran hot with it while my hands and feet had gone to ice, the pounding of my heart loud enough I could hear it. This was no longer the prickling fear of a moment. It was the settled, icy certainty of despair. And, in that terrible place, a sliver of cold resolve struck me, just a thought, brief and terrible. What if I die in here? No water, no food, no one even to call for help. If I, a mother alone and forgotten, collapsed here, how long would it be before anyone noticed? Days? Weeks? Or would I become just another missing old woman, lost without trace in the city? I crawled back to my corner, lay stiff along the ground, the little notebook pressed against my chest. It was the only proof I had left that I existed. That my life, my memories, meant something. I clutched those torn pages, scribbled reminders, and a dozen crooked scripts. The fragments of my life I'd fought to keep and refused to surrender. My head dropped against the cold wall, and I whispered, Hardly even a voice at all. Michael, if you remember your mother anywhere inside you, please, don't let me fade away this way. Please don't let my end be this quiet. This forgotten, only the sound of the faint wind replied, slipping through the crack by the window, and somewhere far off so faint, I could hear the ring of a wind chime on someone else's porch. The city lived. People were out there, eating lunch, hurrying to meetings, laughing, living their ordinary days. But here I sat, on the far side of a locked door, no name, no form, just a shadow trapped in the very life my own son had painstakingly built for himself. My voice was silenced, my needs erased, and in the noise of the world outside this storage closet, not a soul knew I was still here. But I was. And I am. All the way until now. The darkness in the storage room weighed on me like a physical burden, thick, pressing, growing heavier minute by minute until it felt as if the shadows themselves were settled on my chest, crushing the air from my lungs. When the little watch tucked in my pocket pointed to 6:30 p.m., I found it nearly impossible to focus my eyes. Hunger and a parched throat had shrunk hours into long stretches of misery, and the tension winding through my body had finally blurred everything at the edges. My head felt hazy, my mouth dry as dust. I could not even summon the energy to knock anymore. My arms hung slack at my sides, heavy, aching, useless. The last tremor of hope had choked itself out somewhere deep in my throat, the desperate knocking and hoarsened call fading away hours ago. I felt like the restless, invisible ghost of a woman, robbed of her voice after screaming to a world that wouldn't answer. Then, a sound. A faint, deliberate click. Ka, chuck. The doorknob shifted, the mechanism turning ever so slowly. That quiet, metallic movement was all it took to jolt me upright, though in truth, it was not the nimble leap one imagines, but a frantic, aching lurch, as if my body were scrambling to lift itself out of despair. Some thread of hope still quivered at the bottom of my heart. Could it be Michael? At last? Had my son remembered me, not as an afterthought or a burden to stash away, but as his mother, the woman who'd wrapped him in a winter coat, who'd stitched every school patch and wiped every tear? Could he finally recall that I was not someone to be stuffed aside like an old suitcase? Slowly, steadily, the door swung open, but the figure standing there was not my son. It was her. Emily, my daughter-in-law, and yet, how strange to call her that. Her face was as blank and unmoved as a stranger's. She held out her phone in one hand and, in the other, a neatly folded sheet of paper. An Amtrak ticket, printed crisp and white. "You can go home now," she said, her voice flat, not a trace of apology in it. "There's a train to Albany leaving Grand Central at 7:26. If you leave now, you'll make it." I ordered the ticket. "It's in your name." At first, I could not even wrap my mind around her words. I stared at her, quietly, for what felt like a very long time, searching her face for something, anything, that would explain how we'd come to this. It was as if I was looking at her, truly seeing who she was, for the first time. I realized something I'd never named before. In all the years since she'd married into our family, Emily had not once called me Mom, or even Mrs. Book. Thomas, not in affection, not even in courtesy. There was no apology in her voice, no shame shadowing her face, not a hint of regret or remorse to trouble her brow. I braced myself on the side of the doorframe, struggling to my feet. Muscle and bone felt as fragile as glass, and as I forced myself upright, the world spun blank and white in my mind. It looked, just for a moment, like the winters of my childhood. The endless snow in upstate New York, and Michael, barely 4, perched on my back as I slogged through banks taller than he was. But I did not take the ticket from her. Silently, without a word, I walked out past Emily across the kitchen, through the glow of unused countertop lights and past the sink stacked with plates. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody called out to stop me, or to even meet my gaze. I reached the living room. There, Michael was standing, fussing with the collar of his dress shirt, as if heading out for dinner or a meeting. The amber light overhead caught on his hair. His eyes, those same gentle blue eyes I once adored, so full of hope on the day he left for college, would not meet mine. I looked at my son, not with anger, not even hate, but a silent, steady heartbreak. In a voice stripped of all drama, I finally asked, "Why does a mother deserve to be treated like this?" Michael didn't answer. His fists clenched and unclenched around his phone, but he did not lift his head. Silence stretched, the kind of silence that separates people by more than distance. It felt blade sharp, the sort that could cleave trust straight through its center. There, in that moment, I saw the truth as plain as winter sky. A gulf had opened between my son and me, an emptiness so deep nothing could bridge it now. I turned to go. And then, in an instant, I remembered the old phone in my pocket. The battered little flip phone that had survived years of use. Its screen battered but still alive. I'd started its voice recorder running this morning right from the moment I'd rung the bell outside their door. Every voice, every lock turning, every shout and knock in that silent room, every humiliation had been caught and saved, a record of what I'd endured. Quietly, I pulled out my phone. I opened the audio list, selected the latest file, hit share, chose the Thomas family chat group on my phone, almost 20 relatives, from Aunt Linda in Chicago to Cousin David in Boston, and younger ones who used to call me Aunt Margaret or Michael's mom as they ran through my kitchen. I typed a single line. "I came to New York today. This is how Michael and his wife welcomed me." I hit send. A few seconds later, Michael's own phone chimed, his hand tightening around it, and he shot a hard stare at his pocket. Emily stepped forward, voice low, trembling. "What did you just send?" I looked her right in the eyes, steady and unflinching, and answered, "Only what any mom would do." Raise her voice, finally. "That's all." Stillness fell, sharp as broken glass. The fluorescent lights above cast cold, sharp shadows, and the living room felt colder, emptier than I'd ever known. For the first time, it was clear. I did not exist here anymore. Not in this house, nor in the heart of the boy I poured my whole life into. My place in this family was gone. Michael stayed rooted in silence, knuckles whitening around his phone, head bowed as if the whole world had pressed him to the floor. I could read his face, even now. Was he feeling shame? Fear of what the family would say? Or simply anger that I had finally dared not to be silent? Maybe all of it. But I didn't care anymore. I had spent more than 40 years biting my tongue, swallowing every bruise and slight. But, for once, I was done being quiet. Emily's voice shook. "You really want to cause a scene? You shouldn't have dropped by out of nowhere. We have the right to refuse, you know." A faint smile crossed my lips, not loud, not scornful, but the first true smile I'd allowed myself that whole day. "A guest, am I? I'm not a guest. I'm his mother. I gave him life and every scrap of strength I had. I taught him to walk, to stand on his own 2 feet. But maybe I forgot to teach him to look back as well, to remember who stood behind him when he learned to move forward." No one answered. I made my way to the front door, hands shaking as I grabbed the knob. With every step, something deep inside me snapped and came undone. Memories broke loose, years' worth of love, care, joy, and loneliness tumbling silently behind me, the way brown leaves spiral from a November tree. I refused the ticket. I would buy my own. I had enough saved. I owed them nothing, not even that. I would not let myself be sent home like someone tossed out with the trash. There was no backward glance, yet in the very deepest part of my heart, just once, I hoped, oh, how I hoped, that Michael might call out after me as he used to, "Mom, don't go. Please stay." But nothing came. Behind me, I heard the soft, unmistakable click of a lock, a sound as final and certain as the slamming of a lid on the past. When I stepped outside, the sky was shading quickly from pale blue to smoky dusk. The gaps between the houses caught the last of the day's light and spilled it, thick and orange across the sidewalk, so different from the sunsets I knew as a girl, when the fields stretched away forever and the evening crickets sang by the hedgerow. making the darkness seem gentle, warm. This city's dusk was colder, lonelier, its light neither gold nor truly orange, but sharp with something that felt like goodbye. I paused, out front on the little porch steps, and, with my bags at my feet, let myself look back only one last time. That door behind me no longer belonged to me. That home, a place I'd once imagined would be mine, even if only as a guest, had closed itself forever. I was not erased, though. My story, quiet and angry and unwavering, now lived elsewhere, outside those walls. In my words, and in the message I'd sent. The world, I hoped, would listen. And I, Margaret Thomas, would not fall silent again. What lay beyond that door was a place I once believed to be my dream. The house my son built. The place I'd hoped would become the family nest. But what I found there was a husk as cold as stone, a shell where people, hearts locked away, moved through the motions of family simply by form, not by feeling. I did not move at first. For a few minutes, I just stood in the entryway, rooted. I was checking inside one last time, if my heart was yet whole. Everything I had believed in as a mother, all those convictions, I could now feel them leaving me as the deep understanding dawned. I had just lost them. In my hand, my cell phone screen was still glowing. The recording app, opened and ready, cast its faint blue shade over my lined and sweat-streaked face. Messages were already flooding into the Thomas family group chat. Stickers of shock, cartoon faces wide-eyed in surprise, questions bubbling in a dozen voices, a string of missed calls, frantic names and numbers flashing up faster than I could read. But I didn't answer, not right away, because, in that moment, those replies weren't what I needed. What I wished for, what my heart wanted, was a single word from my son. But from that house behind me, no sound came. Not footsteps, not the rush of someone hurrying after me, not a voice calling, "Mom!" None of it. The way I had once held Michael's small hand and kept him close, there would be no one now to take mine. There was just the wind rattling through the yard, and the brittle sound of dead leaves tumbling over the asphalt walk. That was all. So, I started walking, slow and steady, but determined. One foot, then the other. Some part of me already knew, at that precise moment, that I had reached the end of a chapter, and that there would be no looking back, ever again. The second I sent that voice recording to my relatives, my cell phone, tucked tight in my coat pocket, began to buzz and vibrate. Non-stop, relentless. The screen pulsing and lit up with notifications, family names blinking before my eyes, each closeness and memory stirring inside me. All familiar? Linda from Chicago, Uncle Harold from Pennsylvania, Aunt Susan from Boston, even Nora, my cousin from Florida, whom I hadn't seen in over a decade. Oh my God, were you actually locked in a shed? I can't believe it. Emily's gone way too far. What the? Michael, how could you do this? You've lost it. Margaret, go public. This needs to be exposed so they answer for what they've done. But I didn't answer. I just looked at the bright screen and let the silence settle deep. Because inside my chest, where anger should have been, all I felt was exhaustion, a bone-deep, marrow-rattling fatigue. I had never been the type to air my grievances. Even in old age, I'd never asked for much. But to realize that I'd have to teach my son the heart of a human being, even now, after 72 years, that alone was just too heavy to bear. I went, quietly, into my little house. At the kitchen table, I pulled out a folded sheet of paper, a blank page I'd carried with me everywhere, where my loneliness, which I could share with no one, was written out in pencil, line after line. With my hand unsteady and numb, I wrote, "You don't have to apologize." All I ever wanted was respect. In my lifetime, I've learned, staying silent doesn't make you loved. I placed the note gently on the table. Beside it, I laid the handkerchief embroidered with Michael's college monogram. The one I'd stitched myself when he got his acceptance letter years ago. That handkerchief, so carefully made, never once used. Just then, Emily, my daughter-in-law, shuffled down the stairs. She was pale as a ghost, mascara smeared from her tears, her hand clinging to the stair rail as though afraid she might collapse. Gone was the cold, distant composure I'd seen so often. All that remained was fear. Pure, unmistakable fear. Fear not for me, not of what she'd done, but of what exposing it might bring. Fear, above all, that the truth would now be known. Behind her came Michael. His white dress shirt had been exchanged for a wrinkled t-shirt. He didn't look polished any longer. He looked just like a lost child, spent and shrinking. Michael's skin was chalk white, lips pressed together tight, eyes darting everywhere but at me, as though if he didn't speak, he wouldn't have to face the crumbling of everything between us. But he didn't say a word, and I didn't turn back. I left the house, closing the front door myself, this time with my own hands. No one tried to stop me. No one called after my name, no voice from behind. "Mom, please." And maybe, even if someone had, I don't think I would have found the courage to look back. I walked away, toward Penn Station. All I carried was a simple tote bag. Inside, my cardigan and notebook. I bought the train ticket myself, lining up at the kiosk, just like I once taught Michael. Take care of yourself. Do things with your own hands. Now it was my turn, and I was ready to do just that. On board the night train, my reflection gazed back through the glass. Deep wrinkles and grief written in every fold. So much loss behind me. And yet, a strength, forged gently from everything I'd survived, still glimmered there, small but steady. By the time I reached Albany, it was nearly midnight. No one waited at the station. Emptiness echoed along the platforms and hallways. The air cold, the world hushed. I made my way quietly out, flagging an idle taxi at the corner. The driver, George, a kind soul, had once taken me to the hospital a few months ago. "Oh, Mrs. Thomas, glad to see you up and about," he greeted. I gave a soft smile. My voice was light, even content. "Thank you, George. I think I'm stronger than I've ever been." Come morning, the old house phone wouldn't stop ringing. Neighbors, relatives, even a reporter from the local Times-Union. The news had spread through cousins, then through Facebook, even from old college friends of Michael's who recognized the story. Gently, waves of voices, soft but growing, were now pressing against that old wall of silence. A childhood friend, now a journalist, called and pleaded, "Let me write this as a feature. A story about elder loneliness in America. It matters." But I declined. I did not need an article, or pity. I was not a mother locked in a shed, not just a victim, not a woman who survived only to be gawked at by strangers. What I had wanted all along was Michael's awakening. Not apologies, not atonement, just to be seen, truly heart to heart. To know, in my son's eyes, that I was real, that I mattered. But what came 3 days later was a box delivered by courier. Inside, a single letter. Scrawled, hurried, untidy. "Mom, I messed up. I don't even know how to make this right anymore. Please just tell me what you want from me. I'm sorry." I read it 3 times. First, my heart eased, just a little. Second, a sharp anger, raw and honest, broke through. Third, tears pooled and fell. But what I had truly wished for after all these years wasn't an apology. What I needed was just that one word, Mom. And in that letter, what I found wasn't the voice of a child finally reaching for me, but an adult's trembling, guilty fear of having failed. I did not write him back. Instead, I folded the letter and hid it below the wool scarf Michael had knitted. Age 10, a talisman of a sweeter, simpler time. Now, I slip quietly into my old routines again, watering the petunias in the backyard, going to the morning market for fresh eggs and peaches, curling up each dusk with a borrowed book, and somehow, the eyes of my neighbors look at me differently now, with respect, and with a gentle, understanding kinship. Change is slow, but it stirs, and, at last, I know. My voice is still here, my worth is real, and my story, at last, belongs to me. There are people here who invite me to things, community events, recipe swaps, classes at the senior center. Before long, I find myself included in little gatherings, widows and women living alone, sipping tea while the kettle whistles and sunlight falls gently through lace curtains. And in the midst of those kind, quiet souls, I begin to feel unexpectedly that I belong even here. So I let myself simply smile, a soft, private smile, barely pressing at the corners of my lips, because somehow, deep in my chest, I sense something new might finally be beginning for me. And yet, what about Michael? Once upon a time, my greatest wish was for that family, his family, my family, to become my final harbor, my safest place. Can we really change, any of us? Or is it all too easy to fall back into silence? To drift again through life letting everything go unsaid and unchallenged? I do not know. But there is one thing only that I now know for sure. I will never, ever be silent again. That evening, the setting sun glanced in gold across the tall pines behind my little house. The daytime breeze had calmed, just the faint rustle of branches being stirred. I carried my favorite wicker rocking chair out onto the porch. There, settled beneath the eaves, I looked quietly into the yard, into the bright yellow clusters of mums that had just begun to open their first bold blooms. Their petals, trembling on the wind, seemed to shiver delicate, yes, but brave somehow, holding their shape, shining bright, not hiding in the shadows. They looked exactly the way I felt, right down in my soul, fragile yet proud, gentle yet standing tall. Just then, I wasn't alone. A stray cat, tabby-furred and thin, crept quietly through the garden. She paused a few feet from me, then threaded her narrow body around my ankles, rubbing her head gently against my foot. I bent as low as these tired bones allowed and stroked her bony back with a slow, careful hand. How long had it been truly since I'd felt the warmth of another living thing? It wasn't the warmth of another person. No. This was something different, softer, more innocent. This little creature wanted nothing from me but a gentle touch, and asked for no reward. A thought wandered through my mind, bittersweet as autumn. Someday when I am gone, will anyone remember me? Not just as Michael Thomas's mother, but as my own person, as Margaret? Will anyone picture my face? Recall the shape of my laugh? Remember how gently I once cared for the world? Or will I exist only as a name beside his, barely more than a shadow in someone else's story? I stood up, shaking off the chill of that thought, and slipped inside through the old screen door. I opened the battered cabinet near the kitchen and took out a small picture frame, the glass a little clouded from age. Inside, there is a photo, three people, side by side beneath blossoming white dogwood. Michael as a boy of maybe 10, my late husband John, and me. All smiling, mouths wide with laughter, arms braced around one another. That dogwood tree, bare now behind my house, was weighted with snowy petals in that memory. When we were young, when we were in the truest sense, a family. The photo is faded now, the frame worn, wood chipped and its stain dull with decades. But our eyes, it strikes me all at once, our eyes have not changed at all. Still, they look out from that paper, warm and together, filled with the knowledge of some secret only family can share. I carried that frame gently to the mantel in the parlor, where John's ashes rest beside a small flickering candle. With slow, careful hands, I lit a single stick of incense, jasmine, for memory, and pressed both hands together in front of my heart. Quietly, I let the words tumble through my mind, not speaking them, not needing to. John, I did what I promised, all those years ago. I raised our boy the very best I could. I brought him safely this far. But now? This next part, I think it is beyond where my hands can reach. I turned away, as gently as I'd come. Behind me, the coil of incense smoke drifted high in the lamplight, curling and dissolving into the air, vanishing. It felt, somehow, less like saying goodbye to a person, and more like closing the chapter on a whole life, a signal just between myself and the world that one season was ending, and another one, almost without my notice, had begun. 3 days since I'd come back upstate. The event that I'd believed so surely was the end of everything, faded and gone. Instead, it flared outward. An unexpected spark caught the world's attention. I'll never forget the headline, bold across the front page of the Albany Herald. Elderly mother shut in shed by own son and daughter-in-law. The truth beneath. The glitter of modern Brooklyn. My own name was never printed, but anyone from our town, anyone in our circle knew at once they meant me. The details told the rest. There was an illustration gray, almost haunting, of a thin old mattress laid on warehouse concrete, a single ray of light spilling through a narrow window set far overhead. And there, word for word, were lines from the voice recordings I'd sent to our extended family chat group, the tremor in my voice as I pleaded for someone, anyone, to answer. The sharp knocks I'd sent through the locked door, over and over, ghostly as a clock marking the last minutes on Earth. Within hours, the article was everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, the local news. My story was shared and repeated thousands of times. In the Twitter trends for New York State, Shed Mom case leapt into the top 3. On message boards for women, caregiver support groups, organizations for elder rights, my experience was read, discussed, and picked apart. People didn't just pity me, many knew what I'd endured. They sent messages that pulsed with both outrage and understanding. For nearly a week, my old house turned into command central. Each day, 30 or more phone calls, distant cousins, old friends, next-door neighbors who'd seen my car in the driveway and wanted to check on me. And more than a few voices entirely new. A woman from up in Maine, 84, called once just to say, "You're never alone. We see you. We hear you. Don't forget that." A television station in Albany called, wanting me to be a guest on a live show about elder care. I turned them down. I did not want my life to become a spectacle for strangers. That was never the point. What mattered wasn't coaxing tears from an audience. I had no use for the world's shallow sympathy. I wanted something else, a long overdue awakening. Meanwhile, down in the city, the ripples had begun. It reached Brooklyn's district office first, a petition from local residents, demanding inspections into the living conditions of elderly relatives. Social workers from the Family Welfare Department showed up at Michael and Emily's door. Our neighbor in Brooklyn phoned, anxious, relaying what she saw. 3 people. Badges pinned to their shirts, standing on the front stoop, 40 minutes, talking, jotting notes. She said people passed by, tried to say hello, but the workers never broke their silence. 3 days later, a certified letter from the New York Department of Social Services arrived for me. Inside was a formal apology, an outline of the investigation underway, and, most unsettling, a signed statement from Michael and his wife. To Margaret Thomas, "We agree from this moment forward never to do harm to your reputation, safety, or peace of mind in any way, ever again." And then another sheet, this time just a handwritten letter. Michael's script. I'd recognize it anywhere. "Mom, I know I can't undo the past, but please, please let us try. I want you to come back. I want you, at home, again, not for appearances, not because of what anybody thinks. Because we are family. Because you are my mother." I read that letter slowly, top to bottom, then again and again. The first time, something lightened inside me, just the smallest flare. The second time, worry came, a scratchy unrest in my chest. And on the third time through, tears welled up and spilled, hot and unstoppable. For all I tried to blink them back. I saw then, in the clearest of ways, what I'd wanted all along was not an apology, not a show of regret, not, "sorry." All I'd really needed was to be called, openly, truly, Mom again. But the words on that paper? They did not come from the mouth of the frightened son I once rocked to sleep, yearning for forgiveness. They came instead from an adult, scared only of what might happen to himself, of what the world would think. Could not write back. Instead, I folded the letter and tucked it alongside the old notes, the cards Michael had scribbled for me as a bright-faced boy, years before, when hope lit everything he did. And then, At last, I made a choice bold enough to shock almost everyone who knew me. I picked up the phone and made arrangements, by my own hand, on my own say-so, to move into an independent living facility in the Hudson Valley, just 2 hours by train from the city, a world away from old Hertz, yet so very close to freedom. I was not being sent away, not for illness, not for infirmity. I chose, freely and fully, to leave behind the role of a mother who exists only for others, and step, at last, into a life that belongs to me. The home is small, not one of those big, impersonal places. It is gentle, quiet, couched in a green valley where every porch brims with geraniums, and where, come April, cherry trees scatter their petals along the walk. My room is a sun-drenched haven with books on the table, a pot of lemon balm by the sill, and a cup of tea always within reach. And here, no one sees me as Michael's mom. No one whispers that poor woman from the news. Here, I am called simply Margaret, or sometimes, with a laugh and a warm hand, Grandma, by people who, though not bound to me by blood, have brought me into their circle like I've lived among them always. My story isn't finished. Now, in these late days, I use my time. The time that's left to me, to write. To tell my truth, raise my voice, reach those who might think they are alone. On my little blog, I share bits of what I've lived, knowing there are others out there in the world who need a sister, a friend, or even just the courage of a voice that has finally refused to stay silent. This is what freedom is, losing the chains of a life spent only as mother. Finding new family of the heart, not the blood. Demanding at long last, not just a place to be, but real respect. I do not forget Michael, not one single day. The ache will never vanish entirely. But now, when I wake and sunshine sifts across my coverlet, and voices down the hall call, "Good morning, Margaret," my spirit is less heavy. There is a new pulse to hope. Winds shift more gently again through the pines. The story moves forward. And so do I. Now, in the small retirement community where I live in the Hudson Valley, my world is no longer only shaped by loss, silence, or regret. Each day gently brings me new chapters, unexpected invitations, fresh starts, and one small stirring promise of spring. Every evening, like clockwork, Mrs. Perkins, a 90-year-old woman from the apartment on the other side of the hall, knocks softly at my door. Her voice, though frail, always carries hope. "Margaret, would you join me for a walk down the cherry lane today?" she asks, her eyes bright behind thick glasses. The first time, it caught me off guard to be so easily included, so gently welcomed. Now, it is a ritual I look forward to. Sometimes we barely speak at all. We just listen to the wind shuffling through the budding branches and watch as the late sun dabbles the pink-white blossoms. A quiet rhythm fills those moments, the press of gravel beneath our shoes, the soft hush of our own old bodies moving side by side. For the first time in years, my heart is light as I step outside. Megan, one of the young staff members, all freckles, strawberry blonde hair, and a laugh that's irrepressible, loves to quiz us on the morning news during breakfast in the dining room. The other day, I surprised myself by answering each question correctly, from the weather to which senator was on the front page, through to the number of gold medals. Team USA just took in the latest Paralympics games. Megan clapped and grinned, saying, "Mrs. Thomas, you've still got it, sharp as ever." My cheeks flushed, and I felt a bashful pride, the kind I remember from when I was a girl and my elementary teacher stuck a gold star on my homework just for trying hard. Some things the world teaches us late in life, but not too late. I have started to learn them now. For example, I spent most of my life believing I couldn't draw. That creativity was a luxury only for others. But here I found a watercolor class held down the hall every Tuesday. I've made cupcakes, real frosted ones, with sprinkles that melt on the tongue under the patient supervision of Mrs. Daging Waters, who was once a pastry chef in Philadelphia. She says I have a knack for swirling the icing, and she's pressed one of her handwritten recipes for carrot cake into my palm. for your family visits. These little firsts give me hope. I never touched a computer until my 70s, but now, supported by Megan, and with much perseverance, I have my own little blog. A simple place, but all my own. There, I write about the days as they pass, my quiet thoughts, the moods that linger in the air after supper, small joys, old memories, and sometimes, the dark bits, the hurt that still aches but no longer cuts clean through. Words come easier now, softer, freer than when I was young. Even the sorrows of my history, those painful, ragged losses, find gentler form. They grow less sharp as I give them shape. Just last week, the sun was beaming through my window, and I noticed that the potted plum tree I'd coaxed to grow indoors, against every expectation, had opened its first small blossoms. Their petals, white as milk, glowed in the afternoon light. I took a photo to post on my blog, and, for once, I found the right words. Not every winter ends in fire, I wrote. Sometimes a winter ends in light, gentle, unlooked for, surprising as hope itself. Astonishingly, the post was shared more than 8,000 times on Facebook and Twitter. Comments poured in faster than I could read. Inboxes filled. "You given me strength. Because of you, I won't be silent anymore." Oh, so many voices. I learned I wasn't alone. The words I had spent a lifetime swallowing, thinking my story was too private, too small, had carried much further than I ever dreamed. Within days, I began receiving letters, not just emails, but real letters, scrawled in careful script on lined paper. Coming from women across the country, I was abandoned by my daughter after I moved across the country to help with her kids. My son put me in a hospital and never came back. I thought I'd never find the courage to speak. I thought it was just me. But it wasn't just them. It wasn't just me. "Margaret, you are hope for all of us," they confided. "You are our voice. Please keep writing." And somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling alone. In fact, for the very first time in my 72 years, I began to sense deeply and truly that I was needed. That, in some way, I was making a difference. Small, perhaps, but real as rain. Maybe, I thought, this is the family I was searching for all along. Not family by blood necessarily, but by feeling, by mutual understanding and respect. A family not of lineage, but of spirit. And Michael, my son, what of him? Even before anyone told me, I sensed it. He was reading my blog too. There was never a comment, never a like, no markers left to show he'd been there. Only the faint trail of anonymous visits, the ghost of his care lurking within the silence. Once, that silence was worse than a slap, a wound that bled for years. But now I know, silence is sometimes all that's left of apology. The only way a damaged soul can say sorry without words. One afternoon in June, I was watering the lavender on the second-floor balcony outside my room, when one of the staff called my name. "Mrs. Thomas? There's a letter for you." She handed me a simple envelope. No return address, nothing elaborate, just two careful words in single, rounded letters, "To Mom." I opened it slowly, my breath catching just a little. Inside was a folded card, the sort you buy in packs from a drugstore. The lines on the sketch were awkward and untrained, but I recognized what they depicted immediately: white plum blossoms, shy and luminous. Turning the card over, I found a single sentence, written in my son's own, unmistakable scrawl. "This spring, would you take a walk with me among the flowers? One more time?" Gratitude punched the air from my lungs. I folded myself into the nearest chair, pressing my hand gently to my heart. For many moments, I did not move. Not because it hurt, or because I wept, but because something stranger happened. For the first time in years, the raw, wounded feeling faded away. It didn't matter when Michael drew the picture, or even how much courage it took for him to write those words, or how heavily the past might press on us. Still, what mattered is that the boy I'd lost in silence, that tender, uncertain child, still lived somewhere inside the adult who had done me wrong. That child had never fully gone. I placed Michael's card in my window, where the afternoon sun spilled through, making the white plum blossoms glow so they looked almost alive again. And within me, something quiet and unbeaten started to bloom too. A small, persistent hope, buried long ago, now gentle and new as spring grass. Hope. If anyone were to ask me now, after all I have endured, how do you go on with such peace? I know my answer. It is only by letting go of the expectation that others will always return my kindness in equal measure. I used to believe, with all the certainty of a mother's heart, that the bond between parent and child was unbreakable. That if I simply loved enough, gave enough, waited long enough, love would always circle back to me. But that is not how life works. Not really. No love, not even a mother's, should become only self-sacrifice. If we give without end, love becomes heavier than hope itself, a burden, not a blessing. Life has taught me this. Love has its limits, and the truest gift is learning to treat myself with care and respect. The senior residence where I live is modest, nothing fancy, nothing more than what I need. Yet in these sunlit halls, I am truly able to begin again. The feeling is like looking down at a fresh, blank sheet of paper, an unclaimed space for a new life. At dawn, I rise early, open the window, and breathe in the smell of rain-damp earth. I attend classes, watercolor, flower arranging, and, with hands that once shook from nerves, I learn the gentle grace of making tea. Under the pink drift of dogwoods in the courtyard, other women and I share stories about the old days, not in bitterness, but sometimes in laughter. We let the past rest as past and look to tomorrow. Here, new friends bloom. Edna, 85 years young, who once worked as a schoolteacher. She snaps Polaroids with the same battered camera she's carried since 1975, capturing wisps of steam from her mug, beads of dew on rose leaves. Even the tabby cat, daring to slip into the kitchen looking for a snack. One afternoon, I asked her, "Don't you get lonely here? With your grandchildren so far away?" Edna beamed, her eyes bright behind thick lenses. "Of course I'm lonely sometimes," she replied. "Not sad, just honest. But I've learned something. The part of life I still control, I treasure. I won't spend my precious days chained to someone else's hopes." Her words resonated within me, echoing the lessons I've struggled to claim as my own. Aging, I've come to see, is not hardest for the wrinkles or memory slips, but because it demands we surrender the roles we carried for a lifetime. I am not just Michael's mother. I am Margaret Thomas. A woman. A person. A survivor of hurt, now free to shape her own life, for herself first. Yesterday, I wandered by the woods that border the property, under the dappled light. I spotted a sapling, slender yet determined, growing between two rocks. Its trunk wavered in the breeze, but with each gust, it bent only enough to reach ever higher for the sun. I lingered there, studying that tree. I thought, we are all, sometimes, left alone, forgotten, or hurt. Yet, if we still manage to stand, and stretch even a little toward the light, even after loss, even after silence, that is the greatest victory of all. Greater by far than forgiveness or someone else's pity. I have not seen Michael again, not since that afternoon in Brooklyn. I am not angry now. I do not waste my hours on blame. People do not change overnight. Healing takes time and courage on both sides. So I wait for nothing. But my heart, at last, is wide open. I leave the door unlocked, because you never know someday someone you love may find their way home. And softly say, "I'm back." I write this letter as summer begins to creep in. From my window, all the cherry trees have shed their petals, and the new leaves have unfurled into bright green abundance. I am content with this gentler beauty, quiet, unadorned, steady, and sure. Just like the woman I am today. I am not pitiful, not a victim. I am a survivor. I have not sold myself out for a false peace, nor surrendered to disappointment. I have chosen, with purpose, a life that has worth not to prove my value to anyone, but so the days that remain will truly be mine alone. If you, the one reading these words right now, are carrying wounds inside your heart pains that you've never been able to speak aloud. If, for a long stretch of your life, you lost sight of yourself while trying to do right by others, or maybe, without meaning to, you ended up hurting someone close to your heart, then, please, just for a moment, pause. Stop in your tracks, take a breath, and ask yourself quietly, have I really listened to the voices of those I love most? Listen deeply past the surface, past my own defenses? Did I give so much of myself for others, for family, for obligation, that I forgot who I truly am? Dare. I imagine stepping outside the old roles I've always played, mother, provider, peacemaker, whatever they've been, and find the courage to begin again, this time for me. If your honest answer is, not yet, or even just, I'm not sure, that's all right. What? You still have time. As long as you're here, as long as the sun rises again, there is time to start over, to try again, to heal, to find yourself anew. How do I know? Because at 72, I, Margaret Thomas, had to learn how to love myself all over again, from scratch. If anything in my story has resonated with you, if it sparked even a glimmer of feeling, please, don't let it stop here. Pass it on. Share a piece of it with someone you love, someone who may need it too. I don't crave fame, or to become a face splashed across the news, or a hashtag trending for a day. What I want is much simpler. Somewhere, right now, there's someone the world has forgotten. Someone who feels invisible. For that person, I hope these words can be a hand reaching out, a voice whispering, you are not alone. Maybe you've been a parent once, or a son or daughter. Maybe, at some point, you meant to show love but lost your grip on it, and walked away before you meant to. If that's true, then let yourself take a small step. A simple message, one thoughtful call, or, sometimes hardest of all, a letter, even if your hand shakes as you write. Because the truth is, once a door between loved ones is closed, it may never open again. And what do you think? Have you, like me, ever held your tongue for so long you forgot the sound of your own voice? Have you ever been hurt by someone dearer to you than anyone else in the world? If you feel ready, I hope you'll tell me your story. Leave a comment, share your truth. Let me hear how you endured, how you survived, and, maybe, how you began again, even after hope seemed lost. Because, just maybe, right at the end of your telling, a new kind of light might appear. Gently, quietly. Even when you thought all you had left was darkness, hope blooms, just like spring. So please don't turn away from your own story. Don't be silent. I promise to listen if you wish to speak. And no matter what you're carrying, no matter how invisible you feel, you are not alone. Let's walk forward, in hope, together.